Robert Kenneth Stewart was born on September 12, 1963, in rural North Carolina, a quiet, ordinary town where everyone knew everyone, where days passed slowly, where people trusted their neighbors, and where, for most, life felt safe, predictable, even peaceful. But behind that thin layer of normalcy, in the private corners of Robert Stewart's world, something far darker had been quietly taking shape for years. Robert grew up as the kind of boy who kept to himself, withdrawn, uncertain, but always simmering with something he couldn't name. People described him as distant, quiet, maybe even odd, but no one ever thought he was dangerous. His childhood wasn't remarkable. A strict father, a mother who tried to hold the family together, and long, silent evenings where emotions were swallowed rather than spoken. He dropped out of high school early and spent most of his adult life drifting from one job to another, never really finding a place that felt stable. He was a truck driver for a time, then a construction worker, then unemployed. Friends from his early life later said that when Robert drank, something inside him changed. The quiet man became tense, paranoid, convinced the world had wronged him, convinced that people were laughing behind his back. He had an explosive temper, one that flared quickly and cooled just as fast, leaving behind the smell of alcohol and regret. In 2007, Robert met a woman named Wanda Neal, a kind-hearted nurse who worked long hours caring for the elderly. Wanda was compassionate, patient, and steady, the kind of person who believed she could help anyone. Friends warned her about Robert's temper, about his heavy drinking, but Wanda saw the man beneath the anger, the one who promised to change, the one who said he just needed someone to believe in him. And for a while, she did. They married in 2008, and for a brief time, it seemed like things might finally turn around for Robert. But the illusion of peace didn't last. Neighbors remembered the shouting, the slammed doors, the nights when Wanda fled the house crying. They saw Robert's car parked outside bars until late into the night, saw him stumble home, red-faced, muttering to himself. It became clear to everyone, except Robert, that his drinking was spiraling out of control. He accused Wanda of seeing other men, of lying, of trying to leave him. The paranoia grew, fed by alcohol and sleepless nights. He began calling her constantly at work, demanding to know where she was, who she was with, and when she'd be home. By early 2009, Wanda had had enough. She left him, moving out of their small trailer home in Carthage and into an apartment closer to her work at Pine Lake Health and Rehab, a quiet nursing facility that cared for elderly residents suffering from dementia and Alzheimer's. She told friends she still cared for Robert but couldn't take his rages anymore. She hoped that by leaving, he might finally face his demons, maybe even get help. But Robert didn't see it that way. To him, Wanda's departure wasn't a cry for peace. It was a betrayal, a rejection that shattered what little pride he had left. He called her relentlessly, sometimes pleading, sometimes threatening, alternating between love and rage in the same breath. He told people that she had ruined his life, that she had turned everyone against him. He began isolating himself even more, drinking every day, spending hours locked inside his home with the blinds drawn, muttering that someone had to pay. In late March 2009, a few days before the tragedy, neighbors noticed Robert acting strange, even for him. He was pacing outside, staring into space, mumbling about taking care of business. He made cryptic comments about Wanda, saying things like, "She'll see what she's done." One acquaintance later told police that Robert had mentioned Pine Lake by name, saying it was where she hides. The night before March 29, Robert barely slept. He sat alone in his living room, surrounded by empty beer cans, a half-burned cigarette smoldering in the ashtray. On the coffee table in front of him lay a shotgun, a .22 caliber rifle, and a .357 Magnum handgun. He cleaned them one by one, hands steady, his face blank. Investigators later found evidence that he had been searching the internet for his wife's work schedule and the layout of the nursing home. That morning, March 29, 2009, the small town of Carthage woke up to a peaceful Sunday. The air was cool, the sky clear. At Pine Lake Rehab Center, nurses arrived early for their shifts. Residents were having breakfast. Soft gospel music played in the background. Wanda was already there, dressed in her scrubs, tending to patients in the Alzheimer's ward. She had no idea her husband had been up all night, no idea that he was about to drive there with a loaded shotgun beside him. At around 9 a.m. and 30 minutes, Robert climbed into his Jeep, the weapons laid out on the passenger seat, and began the drive to Pine Lake. Witnesses later described seeing him pull into the facility's parking lot just before 10 a.m., his face expressionless, his movements slow and deliberate. He parked near the side entrance and sat there for several minutes, engine running, staring at the building. Inside, nurses and residents went about their routines, unaware of the danger sitting just outside their door. Then, it began. He stepped out of the vehicle, loaded the shotgun, and fired the first blast into Wanda's car, shattering the driver's side window. The sound echoed across the parking lot, a deep, thunderous crack that made people inside freeze for a moment, unsure of what they'd just heard. He fired again and again, blowing holes into the doors, glass spraying everywhere. Inside, staff began to panic. Someone shouted, "Gunshots! Someone's shooting outside!" Patients were wheeled into rooms. Nurses tried to lock doors. Phones rang as 911 calls poured in. Wanda, realizing what was happening, ran toward the Alzheimer's ward, punching in the code on the locked door, ducking inside just as another blast echoed down the hall. She hid in a bathroom with another nurse, trembling, her heart pounding in her chest, praying the code lock would keep him out. Outside, Robert moved toward the main entrance, the shotgun pumped, the echo of each shot rolling through the quiet air. Witnesses later said he looked calm, disturbingly calm, as if he were walking through a dream. He stepped through the door, eyes scanning the hallway, ready to destroy anything that reminded him of the woman he believed had betrayed him. The nightmare had only just begun. It was just after 10 a.m. and 2 minutes on a quiet Sunday morning in Carthage, North Carolina. Inside Pine Lake Health and Rehab, the day had started like any other. The gentle hum of fluorescent lights, the squeak of nurses' shoes against the linoleum floor, the soft rhythmic beeping of heart monitors in the background. Residents sat in the lounge, some half asleep, others chatting quietly about breakfast, the weather, and the Sunday church service that would soon begin. Then, the sound that shattered everything. The first shotgun blast ripped through the air, so loud it seemed to split the world in half. It came from the parking lot, and for a split second, no one could quite believe what they'd heard. Then came another shot and another, and the screams began. Inside, a nurse named Jerry Avant Jr., 39 years old, looked up from the nurse's station, confusion flashing across his face. He had worked at Pine Lake for years, beloved by staff and residents alike. Known for his kindness and patience, Jerry was the kind of man who stayed calm even when others panicked. But now, hearing that deep, echoing thunder outside, his instincts told him something was very wrong. He stood up, heart pounding, and moved toward the main hallway. Through the glass doors, he could see a man, middle-aged, heavy-set, dressed in jeans and a dark jacket, moving toward the building with a shotgun in one hand and a handgun holstered at his side. His eyes, cold, fixed, like someone marching toward a purpose that could not be undone. Jerry shouted for everyone to get down, to lock the doors, to call 911. But before anyone could move, the man, Robert Kenneth Stewart, stepped inside. The first blast tore through the reception area, splintering wood and glass, scattering debris across the floor. Panic erupted. Nurses screamed. Residents cried out in confusion, some unable to understand what was happening, others frozen in their wheelchairs. Stewart didn't hesitate. He moved down the hallway, shotgun raised, firing into rooms, into walls, into anything that moved. The 911 center in Moore County lit up with calls, desperate voices, chaotic screaming, gunfire echoing in the background. "There's a man with a gun. He's shooting everyone. Please hurry." Dispatchers tried to calm them, sending out every available officer to the scene. Carthage police officer Justin Garner was the first to respond. It would take him less than 5 minutes to arrive. But inside those walls, 5 minutes felt like forever. Robert Stewart moved with terrifying precision. He wasn't running, he wasn't shouting, he was simply walking, slow and deliberate, down the long hallways of the nursing home, firing as he went. He reloaded calmly, methodically, the sound of shells hitting the floor marking his path like a grim metronome. In one room, he he encountered 98-year-old Louise Deckler, bedridden and unable to move. She had lived through 2 world wars, the Great Depression, and decades of change. Yet here, in her final days, violence came for her in a place meant to keep her safe. She never stood a chance. He turned to the next room. Lillian Dunn, 89 years old, a retired school teacher, beloved by generations of students, gone. Then 75-year-old Tessie Garner, a widow whose family visited every Sunday after church, gone. It was as though time itself had stopped. The hallways filled with smoke, with the acrid smell of gunpowder and fear. Nurses huddled in storage rooms, whispering prayers. Someone shouted, "He's coming this way!" And people scattered, trying to shield patients, trying to barricade doors with whatever they could find. At one end of the facility, Wanda Neal, Robert's wife, crouched inside a small bathroom with another nurse, the sound of gunfire echoing down the corridor. Her hands trembled as she clutched her phone, dialing 911 again and again, whispering, "Please hurry, he's here, he's killing everyone." She could hear him calling out her name in the distance, his voice low, broken, almost pleading. "Wanda, Wanda, where are you?" The irony was unbearable. The man she had once loved, the man she had once tried to save, was now hunting her in a place filled with the most helpless people imaginable. At 10 a.m. in 7 minutes, Officer Justin Garner's patrol car screeched to a stop outside Pine Lake. Garner, only 25 years old, had been on the force for less than 4 years. He had no backup, no tactical gear, just his uniform, his training, and his courage. As he stepped out of his car, shotgun blasts echoed from inside. He radioed dispatch. "Shots fired at Pine Lake Nursing Home. I'm going in." Inside, Stewart had just entered the common room. Several residents were gathered there, some unable to move, others too frightened to run. Among them was 78-year-old John Walter Goldston, who had been watching television just moments before the chaos began. Stewart raised his weapon. Another shot rang out, another life extinguished. In another hallway, Jerry Avant Jr. had been trying desperately to protect patients, moving them into rooms, locking doors, placing his body between them and the sound of gunfire. When Stewart turned a corner and saw him, Jerry shouted for others to run, and then, without hesitation, charged toward the gunman. He tried to tackle him, to wrestle the shotgun away, but Stewart fired point blank. Jerry fell instantly. The man who had spent his life saving others had just given it for them. At 10 a.m. and 10 minutes, Officer Garner entered through the front door, weapon drawn. The halls were eerily silent now, except for the occasional cry or distant moan. The air was thick with smoke. As Garner moved deeper inside, he could see the destruction. Shattered glass, overturned wheelchairs, streaks of blood across the floor. Then, a figure appeared at the far end of the hallway. Stewart. He was reloading, his face expressionless, his movements mechanical. Garner shouted, "Police! Drop your weapon!" Stewart turned, raised his shotgun, and fired. The blast caught Garner in the leg and foot, sending him sprawling backward. Pain seared through him, but he didn't stop. From the floor, he aimed and fired back. His bullet struck Stewart in the shoulder, spinning him around, the shotgun clattering to the ground. For the first time that morning, the noise stopped. Garner crawled forward, bleeding heavily, weapons still trained on Stewart. "Don't move!" he shouted. Stewart groaned, clutching his wound. Around them, the hallway was a graveyard of silence, the kind that only follows unspeakable violence. At 10 a.m. and 15 minutes, backup officers arrived, flooding the building. They found Stewart alive but bleeding, surrounded by chaos. Wanda Neal was located minutes later, still hiding in the locked Alzheimer's ward, sobbing, shaking uncontrollably. When police told her what had happened, the lives lost, the people she knew, the devastation left behind, she could barely speak. The rampage had lasted less than 15 minutes. But in that short span of time, 8 innocent people were dead, 1 officer was wounded, and an entire community was changed forever. Outside, ambulances lined the street. Reporters began arriving, the once quiet nursing home now surrounded by flashing lights, yellow tape, and stunned onlookers. Family members of residents rushed to the scene. desperate for answers, some collapsing in grief as names began to emerge. The day that began in peace had become one of the darkest mornings in North Carolina's history. When the gunfire finally stopped, it was 10 a.m. and 17 minutes, but inside Pine Lake Health and Rehab, time no longer had meaning. The air was thick, choking with the smell of gunpowder and fear. Smoke drifted lazily through the halls, curling around door frames and broken glass. Somewhere, a patient was crying softly, calling for a nurse who would never come. The first officers on the scene entered cautiously, weapons drawn, voices echoing down the long corridors. "Carthage police. Is anyone alive in there?" But no one answered. Doors were half open, lights flickered, and the silence between rooms was heavier than the sound of any gunshot. Behind one of those doors, Wanda Neal sat on the bathroom floor, knees pulled to her chest, hands trembling. She could still hear the echoes of the shots in her head, each one sharp, violent, final. She didn't yet know that her husband, the man she once shared a home with, the man she once thought she could save, was now lying wounded in the same building, only a few hallways away. When officers reached her, she refused to leave at first. "Is he gone?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Please tell me he's gone." They told her it was over, that he'd been shot and disarmed. But Wanda couldn't bring herself to move. She was frozen, trapped between disbelief and horror, replaying the morning in her mind. The sound of the first blast, the screams, the fear that he was calling her name. Outside, the scene was pure chaos. Ambulances lined the parking lot, paramedics rushing in and out, stretchers rolling past reporters who were already gathering beyond the police tape. The news spread fast. Shooting at nursing home in Carthage, multiple fatalities. Families of residents began arriving, faces pale, eyes wide, desperate for answers. Some collapsed as names started to circulate. Others waited in silence, clinging to hope that would soon be taken from them. By 11 a.m., the full weight of what had happened began to emerge. 8 dead, 1 officer wounded. The oldest victim, 98 years old. The youngest, 39, a nurse who died protecting his patients. Reporters described the scene as like a war zone. Sheriff's deputies tried to shield the bodies from view, covering them gently with white sheets. Inside, investigators began piecing together the sequence of events, a grim jigsaw of violence and chaos. They found shotgun shells scattered across the floor, bullet holes in walls, shattered glass from picture frames. In one hallway, wheelchairs lay overturned where nurses had tried to push residents to safety. In another, a patient's lunch tray was still resting on a table, untouched, a single spoon lying beside it as if time had frozen mid-bite. And at the center of it all, Robert Kenneth Stewart. He was lying on the ground, bleeding from a gunshot wound to the shoulder, handcuffed, dazed, and muttering incoherently. "I don't remember," he told officers later. "I took some nerve pills. I don't remember." Whether he was lying or truly lost in a drug-induced fog, no one knew for sure. But the devastation was undeniable. As medics treated him, Officer Justin Garner, still bleeding heavily from his leg wound, was carried out on a stretcher. Despite his injuries, he kept asking about the victims, about whether anyone else was alive. His bravery that morning had prevented even more deaths. He would later be hailed as a hero, receiving the Medal of Valor for his actions. Meanwhile, survivors inside the nursing home were escorted out one by one. Some clutched blankets, others cried out for loved ones, disoriented and terrified. Many of the elderly residents had Alzheimer's or dementia. They didn't understand what had happened, only that the calm of their world had been shattered. One woman, 87 years old, looked up at an officer and asked softly, "Was that thunder?" At the local hospital, the emergency rooms overflowed with first responders, family members, and victims. Doctors worked frantically to stabilize Officer Garner and treat Stewart's injuries under police guard. The shooter's clothes were soaked in blood, not only from his own wound, but from others. He kept repeating the same words over and over. "I didn't mean to, I don't remember. I just wanted to talk to her." But the evidence told a different story. Investigators quickly discovered that Stewart had been planning something for days. Witnesses reported seeing him cleaning his guns the night before. Others said he'd talked about making people pay. When police searched his home, they found ammunition boxes lined neatly on the table alongside beer cans and pill bottles. On his computer, there were searches for Pine Lake Rehab, for Wanda Neal's work schedule, for maps of Carthage. By that afternoon, the small town of Carthage was swarming with reporters. Television crews set up across the street, broadcasting live as police briefed the media. Sheriff Lane Carter stood before the cameras, his face drawn, his voice somber. "This is a tragedy beyond words," he said. 8 innocent people lost their lives today. We are still trying to understand why. The names of the victims began to appear one by one. Louise DeClure, 98. Lillian Dunn, 89. Margaret Johnson, 89. John Walter Goldston, 78. Bessie Hedrick, 78. Jesse Vernon Musser, 88. Tessie Garner, 75. And Nurse Jerry Avant Jr., 39. Each name carried a lifetime of memories, families, stories, now reduced to headlines. Local churches opened their doors for prayer vigils that evening. The town gathered, candles flickering in the cool night air, people holding each other, whispering through tears. For many, it didn't seem real. Things like this didn't happen here, not in Carthage. Back at the police station, Wanda Neal sat in a small interview room, her hands still shaking. Officers asked gentle questions. How long had they been separated? Whether he'd threatened her before, if she had any idea why he'd done this. She tried to answer, but her voice broke. "He wasn't always like this," she said softly. "He had demons, but I never thought he'd hurt anyone else. I thought he loved me." That night, as the bodies were transported to the medical examiner's office, investigators began the painstaking process of collecting evidence. The crime scene stretched through nearly every corridor of the nursing home. Blood patterns, bullet trajectories, the exact number of shots fired. All of it documented in silence, the flashing lights outside casting long shadows across the floor. Robert Stewart was transferred to the Moore Regional Hospital under guard. He would survive his wound, recover slowly, and eventually face 8 counts of first-degree murder, along with charges for assaulting Officer Garner. His trial would take years to unfold, filled with testimony about mental illness, prescription drugs, alcohol, and rage. But that night, on March 29, 2009, as the last officers left Pine Lake, one fact was already clear. Nothing could ever make sense of what had happened there. The building would eventually reopen, cleaned and repaired, but the memories, the screams, the gunfire, the loss, would never really fade. Carthage was a small town. Everyone knew someone who had been inside that building. And for weeks after, people would drive past Pine Lake and slow down, staring at it in silence, trying to understand how a place meant for healing had become a place of horror. The corridors were quiet again, but that quiet would never sound the same. For weeks after the shooting, Carthage didn't sleep. The town moved like a ghost. People whispered in grocery store aisles. Churches filled every night with candlelight vigils, and the once busy Pine Lake Health and Rehab stood silent behind yellow tape. What had happened inside those walls seemed impossible, like something that belonged to another world, not to this quiet corner of North Carolina. The funerals began one by one. They came in waves. 8 caskets, 8 families shattered beyond repair. At each service, townspeople stood shoulder to shoulder, holding tissues, shaking their heads, unable to find the words. The faces of the victims were everywhere. In newspaper clippings, taped to church walls, printed on candles. Photos of Jerry Avant Jr., the young nurse who had tried to save his patients, were framed in white flowers at his memorial. His family spoke softly, calling him a hero, saying he died the way he lived, protecting others. Across town, a small group gathered for the oldest victims, residents whose lives had stretched nearly a century, only to end in a place meant to keep them safe. Their obituaries told stories of love, of children raised, of communities built, of wars survived. For many, that was the hardest part to accept, that their final days, after a lifetime of endurance, had been stolen so violently, so suddenly. Meanwhile, the man responsible for it all lay under guard at Moore Regional Hospital, his shoulder wound slowly healing. Robert Kenneth Stewart said little in those first days. Detectives sat across from him asking the same questions over and over. Why? Why did you do it? What were you thinking that morning? His answers were vague, slurred, fragmented. He claimed he had taken 6 nerve pills that day, couldn't remember what had happened, didn't even remember driving to Pine Lake. But investigators found the truth hidden in the days leading up to the attack. He had told people he wanted to talk to his wife, that he wanted her to feel what he felt. He had loaded his guns the night before, left the safety off. He had told one acquaintance, "She thinks she can leave me, but she can't." To prosecutors, this wasn't a crime of confusion. It was calculated, deliberate, the culmination of years of rage, alcohol, and resentment boiling over into one morning of horror. When Stewart was released from the hospital, he was transferred to the Moore County Jail, charged with 8 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder for shooting Officer Justin Garner. His bail was denied. The case quickly gained national attention. Networks covered it for days, labeling it the Carthage nursing home massacre. Reporters descended on the small town, trying to understand what could drive a man to such an act. Some speculated it was a failed marriage. Others blamed years of depression, drug abuse, and untreated mental illness. But the truth, as investigators saw it, was simple. It was hate. During the pre-trial hearings, the defense argued that Stewart had no memory of the shootings, that he was under the influence of prescription medication, specifically a powerful nerve drug mixed with alcohol. They claimed he was not in control of his actions, but the prosecution painted a different picture, one of cold intent, of a man consumed by jealousy and anger who brought not 1 but 3 guns to his wife's workplace and opened fire with full awareness of what he was doing. The trial began in 2011, 2 years after the attack, inside the Moore County Courthouse. Reporters packed the benches, victims' families sat in silence, and Robert Stewart shuffled in, older now, heavier, with gray hair and a blank expression. He rarely looked up. Over several weeks, jurors heard heartbreaking testimony from survivors, from first responders, and from Wanda Neal herself. She described the morning in vivid detail. The sound of gunfire, the screams of patients, the moment she realized her husband was inside the building. Her voice trembled as she recalled hiding in the bathroom, clutching the phone, hearing his voice echoing through the halls calling her name. "He wasn't screaming," she said. "He sounded calm." "That's what scared me the most." Officer Justin Garner testified too. He described entering the building alone, hearing the shots, seeing the bodies, and coming face to face with Stewart. "I told him to drop the weapon," he said quietly. "He looked at me, then fired. I didn't have a choice." His left leg still bore the scars from that morning, a reminder that would never fade. As the trial continued, psychiatrists debated Stewart's mental state. Some said he was severely depressed, suffering from anxiety and possible personality disorders. Others insisted he knew exactly what he was doing. When the jury finally deliberated, it took them several days to reach a conclusion. In 2011, Robert Kenneth Stewart was found guilty of 8 counts of second-degree murder, not first-degree, as prosecutors had sought. The jury believed he had killed intentionally, but without premeditation, citing his mental state and drug use as mitigating factors. He was sentenced to a total of 142 to 179 years in prison, effectively a life sentence. For many, the verdict felt hollow. Wanda Neal wept quietly in the courtroom as the sentence was read. Families of the victims said justice had been done, but no punishment could ever match the weight of what was lost. One relative of a victim told reporters, "You don't heal from something like this, you just learn to live around the hole it leaves." In the years that followed, the town of Carthage tried to heal. Pine Lake Health and Rehab eventually reopened, its walls repainted, its rooms refurnished. But those who worked there said the echoes never really left. Certain corners of the hallway still carried a chill, certain sounds still made hearts race. Officer Justin Garner returned to the force after months of recovery. He continued to serve his community quietly, avoiding the spotlight despite the medals and praise. He said later that not a day passed when he didn't think of that morning, of the people he couldn't save, of the ones who would never go home again. As for Robert Stewart, he remains in a North Carolina prison to this day, aging, silent, rarely speaking to anyone. Prison records show he keeps mostly to himself, reading, sometimes attending church services, rarely showing emotion. In interviews, when asked about the massacre, he still claims he doesn't remember it. But those who lost someone at Pine Lake don't have the luxury of forgetting. They live with the echoes, the questions, the pain. Why there? Why them? Why her? And in the heart of Carthage, where small-town life has long since returned to its quiet rhythm, there's still a sense that something sacred was broken that day. A reminder that even in the calmest places, darkness can sometimes find its way in. Eight candles are lit, one for each soul, as names are read aloud under the same Carolina sky that once watched over them. The breeze carries the sound of prayer, soft and trembling. For a few moments, the world stands still again, not in terror this time, but in remembrance.